Are you too busy? Too stressed out? Unhealthy? Then this is the place for you. Welcome to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals, where we help you create wellness and balance with a holistic approach that will work for you, even with the busiest of schedules, so you can live the life you want. And now, here's your host, Diane Randall.
Hi and welcome. It's my honor and pleasure to introduce you to Marelda Rodrigues, an integrative nutrition health coach, massage therapist, and author of her newly released book, Thriving Authentically. Marelda draws from ancient wisdom techniques for staving off illness and is passionate about helping others enjoy a vibrant lifestyle. Today, Marelda's here to tell us all about her journey to an authentic life and how you can use your own personal power to make life happen. Hello, Marelda.
Hi, Diane. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Congratulations on the release of your new book. And I want you to know I'm just so grateful that you're here to share your journey with us. It's
Thank
just
you
so beautiful. Much. So I would like to start at the beginning of your life in Kuwait before moving to the U.S. In your book, Thriving Authentically, you talk about your life as a third kid culture, being raised outside of your parents' culture. So I want you to start there, if you don't mind.
Sure. I consider myself very blessed to actually have found this identity of being called a third culture kid. For a long time, I struggled to find that identity, and all I knew was I was raised in one country that was not the country of my heritage, and now I'm living in the U.S., which is another country. So I was fortunate enough to draw on the gifts that I received from each culture. So as being born and raised in Kuwait, there are things I understand about the Middle East. I embrace the culture. I love the music. I love the food. Belly dancing is actually a hobby. I'm a student of it. So there are many things that I feel very gifted to have been exposed to this at a really young age. Coupled with that, my parents are Indian, and it's not uncommon. In fact, it's pretty common for Indians to live in the Middle East and make these trips to India to see their families. So my family was just like that.
Okay.
And we would go to India every year. So my father was very particular about me maintaining and knowing who my family members were, but most importantly, knowing who my grandparents were, embracing the culture. And so I straddled two cultures. So during the academic year, I would study in Kuwait. And then during the summer holidays, I would go to India. So I had these two cultures in my life. Now, if you don't know anything about Kuwait, this is it's an interesting country. It does not have a lot in terms of natural resources, and other than oil and the older industry of pearl diving. So everything in Kuwait is man-made or flown in. Mm-hmm. So we have hills. They're just man-made hills.
Okay.
We have foods of different kinds. They're just flown in. And one of the things that I will have to tell you, hands down, some of the best ice cream in the world is in Kuwait, I think, because they flew the cows in because they're affluent enough to
Wait a
this.
minute. They flew the cows in?
Yeah, they flew
Wow.
the Danish cows in. So Kuwait had a collaboration with Denmark. They flew the cows in and took them to air-conditioned warehouses where, we got the best milk on the planet. We got the best ice cream, the best yogurt, everything dairy related was the most amazing stuff I've ever had. I have to say I've traveled a lot and eaten a lot of different ice creams, and I know people are probably rolling their eyes when they hear this and they say, "Oh my God, I've had ice cream in Italy," and I've had all of that. But I will tell you, there's something definitely unique about the ice cream in Kuwait. So being Indian, I also had exposure to how spices are used, for health reasons. And going from Kuwait to India was a bit of a transition because one is a desert, the other is a very lush country. So I didn't like rain. I didn't know what to do in the rain because we don't have rain that much in Kuwait. So there were a lot of adjustments. I didn't like the insects. We didn't have a lot of insects in Kuwait as we do in India, and varied in insects. And so I had to get used to that. I used to, associate going to India with mosquito bites because we didn't really have a lot of mosquitoes in
Mm-hmm.
Kuwait.
Mm-hmm.
So, just the simple things that I guess people take for granted was actually a learning process for me as a child. So the same thing with the foods. There were a lot of foods that my family made in India that I never ate in Kuwait. So I would either turn my lip up at them and, say, oh my God, I don't like this. Now, when it came to medicinal stuff, it was the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmothers had all these decoctions and pastes and recipes from, their grandmothers that they were using for healing. It's what we may call these days country healing. And I would run away. I was like, oh my God, what is this paste that these people are putting on me? Or what is this drink? It's nasty. It's just nasty. Who
Mm-hmm.
drinks this? And, and, you know, I, who knew? Who knew that this was going to come back to be part of my life now? So I grew up going to high school. And once I completed high school in Kuwait, I came to the United States for college, and I've been here ever since.
I want to ask you, when you first came to the United States, what was it like in terms of your initial experience being in a totally different country from your own, Kuwait and India?
Uh, wow, that is uh, a great question because my very first exposure to Kuwait was from Kuwait was going to Fort Worth, Texas. And I will tell you, it was back in the 80s. And the
Okay.
show Dallas was very much in its prime.
Oh, okay.
So, it was so interesting to me I even, we even drove by South Fork Ranch where they filmed it. So it had that much of an importance in Texas, like, oh,
Mm,
the Dallas Fort Worth area, like, oh, this is where, the show Dallas is filmed. And so coming to America was sort of like meeting Hollywood in
okay.
person,
Okay.
first of all. Second of all, it was so different because while I did speak English fluently, I spoke British English,
Okay.
coming from an Indian language school, Indian medium school. Um, so the language was English. I spoke English, but I didn't speak whatever English was here. So I didn't understand slang. My roommate told me I spoke the Queen's English and she would
Okay.
giggle.
Okay.
So, it was definitely an adjustment living by myself in this country with absolutely no family at the time. I was 18 years old.
Okay.
And I literally turned 18 and came to America, and this has been my life since, with very minimal family support. So I learned everything by myself.
Well,
I,
how
I
did you,
learned,
I'm sorry.
sorry, I learned to drive, buy my own car,
Mm,
get my own apartment, things that you would go up to, say, a parent or an uncle or an aunt or somebody. I just didn't have that. So I had to either ask parents of my friends or my friends. Or like a teacher, sometimes I would walk up to a teacher and say, I'm having this difficulty. I don't know how to do this. And I think, I was just blessed with some great people to be able to settle. But it took me almost 2 years in America to finally get settled. I didn't like my college major. I didn't like the dorms. So I changed my major. And I think
mhm.
that was the very first time I owned something in terms of decision making, and basically told my father I was moving to Rochester, New York, changing my major, changing my school, and moving right along.
Okay. In your book, you talked about just being able to do everything. You felt you could take on the world, basically. But somewhere along the way, I'm just trying to recall, you, life wasn't going according to plan. And I want to know, you had this exciting experience, and then what happened?
So, I did have a great time once I graduated college. I moved to Atlanta, it was a new big city, was getting ready for the Olympics. It was, you just felt you were invincible. Um, I started in my career, I was doing really well. I was advancing, I was finding new opportunities. And some things got difficult, I would say, in the corporate world. And I was so young in a role that was really meant for someone probably more mature, or traditionally actually is held by somebody in a more advanced role in their career. I was very young, so I had never made these decisions before. So I was making them from my perspective. Um,
Of
so
course.
while a lot of them were great, some of them kind of, I didn't know how to differentiate a personal decision versus a professional decision on behalf of the company. So that was, in retrospect, I don't even know how I did what I did.
But
I don't even know how
that's
I mean, I had such gumption that I walked into the company that I wanted this job. I talked to the owner of the company and I said, uh, I have to go on vacation. So when I come back from vacation, I need to know whether you're going to give me this job or not. And I don't even know. I was 26 years old. I don't even know how I said that to the CEO of the company.
Well, that's good because you had all the confidence in the world, and then, like you said in your book, something happened. Something happened where you felt you lost your personal power in making your own decisions to a certain extent. I think I read something along those
Yeah,
lines.
so a couple of things happened along the line that completely had derailed me. First of all, I don't talk about it much in the book, I don't think, but my mom passed away. That was
Mm.
definitely, I was 30 years old. Um, she was my best friend. So, being across the country, I'm sorry, across the planet, um, not being able to go to her funeral because I just didn't have the right visa to come back in. So, I had to kind of give my dad phone support. So, a couple of these things were definitely life changing. I feel that from after that point, there was something that changed that I couldn't identify. That I became more aware. I became acutely aware. This was kind of, I want to say, a rebirthing process,
Hmm.
because I became acutely aware of the fact that nothing, no matter what I did, good or bad, no matter what position I held in a company, no matter what I did, none of that was going to bring my mother back. So I could choose how I wanted to go forward. So I chose different ways to console myself and move on from that, grow as a person, and I still continued to advance in my corporate life. The thing is, at one point in my corporate life, I think is when the downward spiral began. I was so caught up in ambition. I was in my mid 30s and I was thinking to myself, well, I'm going to have this position by this age, and that's how I'm going to live my life.
I think a lot
And
of people make
yeah,
decisions like that.
yeah, yeah, like I've heard women say, I've got to have kids by the time I'm 30. Or I've got to have this, I've heard men say, I've got to be, a VP of a company by the time I'm in my 40s. And I don't understand anymore how we put those sort of these markers in our life. Where do we get this, right? So
Well,
how do we come up with this?
it's the external world, and it's
Yeah.
and it's the achievement of the world. I mean, this is part of our training culturally from the time we are little kids. You grow up, you go to high school, you go to college, and you become something of a corporate state or a vice president, a doctor, a lawyer. I mean, this is part of the way we're conditioned from the time we're
Yes.
little to do something along these lines, the
Yes, and
achievement lines. Yeah.
I just really felt this was, it was so much ambition that I could not even see straight. I lived
Mm.
my job, I breathed my job. I have to say, for 5 years, I didn't even get in touch with most of my family or friends or anybody. I just worked because I knew I was going to get that role until I didn't get the role. And I
Mm.
had worked so hard and given up so much of me. I didn't exercise. I just kind of ate. I put on weight. You know, I don't even know who I was.
So what you're saying is your whole focus, your entire focus was on that career.
Yes,
This is great. This
yes,
is
it
great
was the
information.
corporate. I was going to be the corporate. And I went for silly things like I'm going to be the youngest, blah, blah. I'm going to be the only Indian woman who does blah, blah. I would come
Okay.
up with all kinds of things like, I have to, I have to achieve this. And so, what ended up happening is, I paid for it. I paid for it with I want to say I paid for it with my body, mind, and spirit. I don't want to say I paid for it with my life because, I didn't have like a life-threatening disease or anything, but I paid for it in body, mind, and spirit. Um,
But isn't it in a way your life? It's
It
big.
is.
It's bigger
It
than your
totally
life.
is. But what I
Yeah.
meant was,
Hmm.
I didn't want it to come across like it was a life-threatening disease but it was definitely an emergency. It was definitely a life emergency.
Hmm.
My wake-up call was when I sat on the train. I was going from my home in Long Island to the office in Manhattan, and as the train left the station, I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't breathe. I I just felt suffocated and I thought, "Oh my God, I don't know if I'm having a heart attack. Should I tell somebody?" And then I thought, "Okay, well, if you were having a heart attack, you wouldn't exactly have rational thought. So this must not be a heart attack."
So you're doing all this thought
All
processing.
this, right? All this analysis, quick analysis. Oh my God. Okay, I'm sitting up straight. I'm not writhing on the floor. So, and I realized, eventually my breath came back. I calmed down. My stomach was churning over and over and over. And I thought, okay, this was a full blown panic attack. I had come to dislike my job. I had come to dislike the people around me. I couldn't trust anyone around me. Um, and I just
So
felt
what
so bad.
happened to shift you from being able to take on anything in that role to I couldn't trust anyone?
Ah, yes. So this is what ambition does to you. It ultimately makes you bite off more than you can chew.
Of course.
So, of course, being the ambitious person, I drank the Kool-Aid that my manager gave me and said, I'm going to put you in this role. It's going to be good for your development. You're going to do so and so, and it's ultimately going to be a great staging for this other next role that you're looking for. Thing is, I was not suited to the position she was offering me, but I took it because ambition was the only thing that I had in mind. I didn't even stop to think, is this what's going to make you happy? Is that what you want to do? Maybe you should just stay in this role and kind of develop a little more. But I had been so used to everyone picking me for these beginner roles. You can start up this, you're an entrepreneurial spirit, you can do this, you can do that. So I was so used to that staying in something almost seemed like a bad thing to do. Staying in a position to develop for another year seemed mountainous. I was like, what? I am not staying in anything for another year. I am so much more bigger, intelligent, more resourceful, more whatever, well connected. Why would I want to spend another year in this?
So what your corporate bosses wanted you to do wasn't in alignment with what you wanted for yourself.
It they were making a path that had never been made before. So they
Okay.
were making a path for my promotion, but it was, I want to say, not just not defined, it was very ill defined.
Mm.
But I couldn't see that. So I just jumped. I was like, sure, I can jump, no problem. I just jumped right in. And it was trying to land without a parachute. And that's exactly what happened. My parachute didn't go up.
Mm.
So I crash landed, and this was what happened. I completely derailed. I couldn't get my job right. I couldn't get my conversations right. I was failing miserably in this role. It wasn't the role for me, and I had never in my life failed before.
Mm.
I didn't even know what failure was like. So you want to talk about I
So it
what a
sounds,
big learning, yeah?
yeah, it sounds like the universe had a lot of lessons rolled into that early experience for you.
Yeah, yeah, and so ultimately that's what drove me to, the distrust, the I couldn't even trust people enough to ask for help, because I didn't know who was willing to help me anymore, who was talking behind my back, who was trying to sabotage me, because there was a lot of stuff going on in the company as well that were growth related. So, things had to move very quickly. So all of a sudden, like, people were getting fired, people were getting hired, people were getting moved to other jobs, people were moving all around the country for this company. So there was a lot going on. And now what's interesting is when I look back, it definitely, from a whole panoramic view perspective, was a company in turmoil. There was so much going on because after I left, and I took about a 3 month vacation. I went to India. I cleansed my soul. I cleansed my persona. I healed. I slept. I ate. I looked at what in the world had I done. Uh, you know, um, and when I look back now and I look at what was happening, there were just too many things that were not even in my control, but they were trickling down to my position. And so all this stuff that seemed like it was on fire around many places in the country. And right after I left, there was a huge, huge change in the company, like so huge. And I thought, oh, no wonder. Everything seemed like it was in turmoil and a little almost out of alignment of what this company was,
But what about your alignment in terms of when everything changed? How did you start seeing the company and the world from that perspective?
Um, I realized that one, I think the biggest learning was I started to question a lot of things within the company. And I don't know if it's because my spirit was stirred or what was happening, but I started to question things like performance reviews. I started to question raises. I started to question, human resource parameters, things that I had studied for, like how to write a job description. And I didn't believe in that anymore. I
So
didn't believe in
so
human resources
so
anymore.
it sounds like you started questioning everything within yourself. That's what it sounds
Yeah,
like.
yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
There was a lot of questioning of everything. Yes.
So what happened? And I just want you to talk about how you got to thriving authentically. What happened? You're sharing with us what happened to derail you, how you lost your own personal power, if I can say that,
Hmm.
to how you view the world at that time, and what happened to turn things around to get you to a point where you were thriving authentically. And maybe you can share with us what you wrote in some of the things you wrote in the book about that.
Sure. So once I kind of healed, I actually moved to Chicago. I gave human resources a last shot. When I first came here, I applied to a couple of jobs. I thought that was still going to be my career. And I thought, okay, I've healed. I think I've learned. I'll manage it differently. It's a new city, it's a new me. And what I found most interesting is that when I moved from New York to Chicago, I was interviewing for a company. The position was in Chicago, but the manager was in Oregon. And he said, you're the best candidate for this job. I want you in this role in Chicago. I want you to talk to the people in Chicago, and I would really like you in this role. I think you're perfect. And I thought, okay, this is good. So he said, the only thing we have to do is we kind of have to wait because this position is being revamped a little bit, which kind of raised a red flag in my head. And I thought, I'm going to see, I've had a really great connection with this manager. Let me see what it's all about before I say no. And I will tell you, I waited 2 months because the company decided to restructure the position. And then he came back to me and said, Marelda, I would love for you to take this position. Any chance you would like to move to New York? Because the job has been moved to New York. And I thought, oh, no. The universe has just told me that is not my job. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to move on in the direction that I feel I need to move outside of corporate America, right? So I took on jobs just basically to pay the bills, I just to kind of keep afloat. So I took on various jobs. Opportunities really opened up. I ended up teaching massage. I had been a massage therapist for a long time, across many cities, and had an opportunity to teach massage this time around. And I thought, oh, this is going to be interesting. Why don't I do that? I love to teach anyway. I had a training background in corporate America, so this should translate really well. So I progressed through that. I had some great years teaching massage, but I wasn't happy. I was still, it turned out that when you go into academia, it's just a different kind of corporate. You just have to kind of understand what it's about. And I guess I didn't understand that. I thought it was a whole different world. But academia has the same politics, the same structure, the same sort of like pros and cons as, corporate world, right? You're working for someone. At the end of the day, you're working for someone. Right. And I was starting to see a pattern here, how that was not working for me. And I think the things that really prompted me to think were, who gets to say, how does it get to be that, someone else gets to say about my professional development? I could write a performance review, but very little of that's taken into consideration. How is it decided that I am paid less or more than some of the peers? So how is it all decided? And, it was, once again, you're giving up the power to somebody else to make a decision on how much you're worth. So that's what got me really thinking. And it started to take hold on a really bad day when I was talking to my health coach, and all I could do was sob on the phone. And so she did this exercise with me, and she says, okay, we're going to do this exercise on what is wrong with you and why are you crying on this call?
Okay.
So we did a drill down, and the drill down was, I feel this because I feel this because I feel this because, and then when this happens, I feel this, and everything was drilled down. And ultimately what came up was, I feel powerless. And I actually said a word. I said, I feel powerless in everything in my life at the moment.
In my job, in my life, in my world.
Now, the only difference between the first time was I wasn't burned out. I was alerted to that, but I didn't know, how to make power happen. I just knew I was feeling powerless, which is better than being burned out. So
okay.
It's definitely a better feeling. So, moving through, as I was questioning all that, I thought to myself, I just really want to be somebody that guides people through living their best life. How do I do that? Because I'm going to have to do that first, because I can't really teach something to someone. So how do I want to make my life better? And one of the best decisions I made was to become a integrative nutrition health coach. Going to the Institute of Integrative Nutrition was one of the best decisions because it put me directly on the platform I was looking for. I was looking for a platform to talk about health because as a massage therapist, it's very it's limited what I can and cannot do as a massage therapist in terms of teaching people about health. Um, so I wanted a platform that was unrestricted, and that's what IIN gave to me. From there, I started looking at how I could expand as an entrepreneur and what is it that was holding me back? What was really making me powerless versus how could I get the power? So I started looking at the first thing I could do was create a situation where I was taking on jobs that aligned with my value and get rid of everything in my life that was not aligning. Now, was I scared to do that? Yeah. Was that going to cost me money? Yeah. Was that going to take a financial toll? Yeah. Was that going to take a toll on other areas in my life? Yes. But my choice was either to stay and be distressed or take a chance and create something step by step. So I let go of some of my assignments that I was completely engaged in with employers, and I started to do things freelance. So I was 50% freelance, 50% with an employer. That started to work slowly but surely. So I took on more. So I became 2/3 entrepreneurial, 1/3 employer. And that's when I started to realize the more I look at my finances, the more I can control them, the more I can understand that, I don't need a huge apartment. I don't need to buy clothes all the time. I don't need sort of like, what would help me really be happy? I started to think about things like travel. I started to think about living in other countries. When you have a lot of things, it's difficult to live in other countries because you're going to spend your time moving things all over the place. So I had to really think about what was important to me. As I started to look at all these things, I started to understand what it was like to make powerful decisions in alignment with my values, with my goals. And I really had to I know people don't like to hear this word, but I had to get really disciplined around it. And that ultimately helped me really becoming disciplined, owning all my decisions. Slow process. Nobody, it's been 5 years in the making. So it's not something that I just decided, oh, I think I'm going to quit my job tomorrow and I should be good. It's been a very slow, calculated, strategic. I can't even tell you this could be a chess game. Very, very strategic moves to getting to this point. But I found that the what helped me the most is what I mentioned in the book, are the absolute essentials. So those were the things that absolutely, hands down, helped me time and time again.
Tell us about that. Tell us about the absolute essentials.
So the absolute essentials are what I feel are cornerstones to personal power. So in the book, I talk about how I see everyone's spirit as being like an eternal flame. So, because I'll tell you, it is my personal belief that when you are not thriving in your spirit, things like disease set in, things like stress set in. So when you are absolutely sure about your spirit is what helps you thrive. So when I looked at what would help my spirit thrive, I looked at what I had been doing, and what I had been doing became the absolute essential. So a couple of them I had to accept. So acceptance is, for example, an absolute essential. I had to accept a lot of things were going to change. I had to accept unconditionally, which takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of when you have to sit under the bright white light and answer to yourself and say, this is what I'm going to do. You have to accept a lot of things.
Would you
And
also say that it takes a lot of unlearning because you have certain beliefs about life and society, and now you're looking at the world in a whole different way from the inside out, it seems?
yes, yes, it does take a lot of unlearning, and it takes, it takes a lot of just like you're going to shed your stuff, you
Mhm.
shed your mind stuff. So you have to shed your fear. You have to shed your failures. You have to shed your negative talk from maybe a parent or a teacher. You have to shed sometimes what your culture, if you come from some really closed cultures, you have to be the sort of person that steps out of the culture and says, no, thank you. So coming to that acceptance, it will be okay. It will really be okay. That was one of the essentials. Um, I had to also figure out it. One of the essentials too is courage. Uh,
I speak about courage a lot in my podcast from every aspect of life because courage is needed to make decisions, to make that influence your choices that you make in life that really have to do with you and maybe not other people. I talk about that a lot, at least in the first few podcasts. So I'm glad you're actually bringing that word up again. It's a very powerful word.
I
Um,
agree. I agree. It's very, very powerful. And what's interesting is coming as far as I've come, and I look at my clients for all over the place, right? So some clients are more advanced, some clients are beginner clients. They really don't know, they don't have a sense of direction, they don't know where they want to go, and that's all
mhm.
okay. And they reach out for your help, and I take them through a conversation of courage
Mhm.
because if they're not ready, I know they want it so bad, but they might have something holding them back, like a certain
Right.
fear, right?
Mhm.
So being able to look at that fear sort of in a journaling kind of way, in a what's the worst that can happen, let's completely visit the dark side. And I truly, truly believe in visiting the dark side in your life because that's the only way to shed light. It's only when you walk with the lantern into those really dark crevices in your head
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
you shine a light and you realize I could do this. I'm still going to survive. I'm still going to have my 10 fingers and toes. I'm still going to breathe. There may be sacrifices you have to make, but you have to sort of build that grit to take on those sacrifices. Um, and things will work out. I truly believe that things will work out when they're supposed to be worked out. I've seen, even coming from the cultures that I come from, I've seen so many things happen in families, women who've stood up to not having an arranged marriage and saying I'm going to marry this person, and the parents disowning them, but then the grandchild is born and everything's all cheery because the grandchild brought a whole sense of love into their life. Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
So
That's
I've
beautiful.
seen women say I will not be, despite the culture, say I will not be beaten again, I will not be hurt again, and leave even to the point where they've left without their children because in the end, they've believed in their freedom and their sort of dignity. So, courage comes in a lot of different forms. It doesn't have to be big and dramatic. Just, someone saying, I can't do any more negative self-talk. I
And
I just cannot do that
and
anymore.
this is how you're thriving authentically. You're being true to who you are.
Yes.
Sometimes I think that the journey, maybe it isn't about becoming anything. Maybe it's about unbecoming everything that's
Mm.
not you,
Mhm.
so
Mhm.
that you can be who you were meant to be in the first place. The unlearning, the letting go of beliefs that you talked about, the letting go of what you what you were trained and taught that you're supposed to do in this life, and then something happens and you start feeling and experiencing life in a whole different way from the inside out, that, you know what, this is not my path, you know.
Hmm. Yeah. Yes. And sometimes I think, my family thinks I'm crazy. And sometimes I think my dad rolls his
I
head
don't,
all
I
over
don't
his
think that's a
eyes.
bad thing.
No, I've come to accept it because,
You said
I'm not going to
thank
go
you, I
back.
love you too. Because you're living outside of the box. You're
And I
living
think,
outside of the
yeah, and that
box.
falls a little bit on courage too.
Exactly.
When your family's on one side and expects you to be a certain way so that they can recognize you, so to speak. And then when you become this whole different person, they don't recognize you, so they don't know what to do with you. And so they kind of, I've found that some family members, it was so funny, they would try to say things like, "Oh, are you a vegetarian now?" Like they needed something. They needed something to say, "Oh, she's taken on this vegetarian cause." and
Well, that's
and
because they couldn't put a finger on it. And,
they couldn't
in
put a
in
finger.
our
No.
culture, we have to label something. You know what I mean? We have to give it a label, and then we understand it. If we can give it a label,
Yeah, yeah,
that helps us
exactly.
out.
And it's so funny. I think one of the things I tell people is if you try to understand me, you won't. But if you ask me what you want to understand about me, you will.
That's beautiful.
Because I think it's important because I just have this thing about labels, and I will. Have you ever seen a little either cuttlefish or a crab? Like you try to do something and they just run sideways.
Yes.
I'm that way about labels. So as soon as someone says, "Oh, I'm like, "Oh, no, no, I'm not. See, I didn't do this and I didn't do this. So see, I don't fit in that label." But when people start to say, "Why are you eating a lot more vegetarian style?" I let them know I have made a conscious decision in favor of my health that has created this mindset where I feel a more plant-based diet would be better for me. That is not to say it's better for them. That is not to say I will judge them. That is not to say that I won't eat with them, but I just won't eat a lot of non-vegetarian
And
items with them.
this supports you in living authentically, no matter
Exactly.
what. No matter what, no matter who understands it, this is your truth. This is who you
Yes.
are, and this is this is really great. I'm just so grateful that you came and talked to us about living and thriving authentically. I thank you for being here today, Marelda, and sharing your story and being a part of the conversation today, helping people who are struggling to figure out who they are in their own lives. This is a very eye-opening conversation because many people are in the same scenario that you spoke about during the show. And I just want to thank you for being here. To learn more about Marelda, visit her website at www.thecenteredrealm.com. And I want to thank you all for joining me today. Let me know what you thought about this podcast. Either send me a voicemail or an email at feedback@dianerandallconsults.com. Thank you for listening.
Thank you for listening to Balanced Living for Busy Professionals. This podcast is sponsored by DianeRandallConsults.com. If you like this show, the best way to support it is by leaving 5-star feedback on iTunes. And please, feel free to email your questions, comments, and suggestions to feedback@DianeRandallConsults.com. Until next week, namaste.